Now, with the Easter break now at an end, many students may be getting a tad nervous as they go back into their final term before the state exams begin.
Oh, it's all coming back to us. Fear not, as we've got some expert advice on hand with Enda Doherty of Study Skills Ireland. Good morning to you, Enda.
Enda.
Morning, guys. How are you?
We're reliving memories.
Reliving memories. Oh, thank God I'm not back there.
I saw instantly both of your stress levels shot through the roof. I only had to say leaving cert and you both went.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's such a stressful time.
I have such sympathy for anyone going through junior cert and particularly leaving cert.
Yeah,
it's a stressful time, isn't it?
It's very stressful.
Now is when it kicks in as well.
It's very, very difficult. It's stressful. Like it's called a test. It's meant to test you. It's meant to be difficult. But I think in the last few years in Ireland, it's we've constantly raising the points, constantly raising the bar. So we're also constantly raising the stress and expectation on young people. So it's quite tough.
Yeah.
Without opening up a completely separate debate about what we're talking about, but this idea of it all resting on one exam.
Yeah.
At the end of 3-4 years.
Yeah.
Is that not archaic? Should it not be continuous testing throughout?
Personally, I think a compromise where we have some continuous assessment is a good idea. But I think, in loads of events in life, you have a final test. I'm sure when you had your final screen test or you have a final interview for a job, life can be harsh and there is a final test for us a lot of times. But I think probably a compromise is the best. Yeah,
it doesn't define the rest of your life necessarily, but it is important.
But a certain percentage of the end result should be marked through the year or 2 years up to it.
Well, the thing I constantly say to parents and students who I find are getting very stressed and under a lot of pressure with the exams is I say to them, look, the Leaving Cert is the start line. When you finish your Leaving Cert, you can do multiple courses, multiple avenues in life. I often hear teenagers say, I'm 18, I don't know what I want to do. And I say, it's okay, I'm 49, I don't know what I want to do. But it's to realise that it's an opportunity. It allows you to progress to new levels or to new careers. It doesn't have to be this
And there are many paths to the end.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about some actual tips that you have in terms of increasing productivity. This is an interesting one. Active study. What's active study?
Active study means constantly changing the subject you're studying. So the idea of sitting down and saying, right, tonight I'm going to do 5 hours of chemistry, and 20 minutes into it, your brain switches off and you're bored, and you can't accumulate the knowledge and you can't remember what you've studied. So active study means constantly changing the subject, constantly changing the timings. In school we do 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes. I'm looking at your prawn and pasta this morning. If you had, it's beautiful, but if you had it 7 nights a week, 6 days a week, you'd be sick of it instantly. So to stimulate your brain, varying the times, varying the subject, and then varying the methodology. So you might be using video, you might be using audio, you might be highlighting, you might be making questions, you might be working in pairs, there's a million different things you can do, but the real secret, I suppose, is variety, because the minute you stagnate and do the same thing, you get bored very quickly. Like I spoke to a student recently, I saw him studying in my own school in the study hall, and he sat like that for about 3 hours, and he came out and I said, how's it going? He said, terrible. And I said, what's wrong? He said, it's really boring. I said, which bit? He said, the study. And I said to him, but you're not studying. I said, you're staring. Like he sat for 3 hours and then couldn't figure out why he wasn't engaged or he wasn't, his brain wasn't accumulating the knowledge.
Yes, okay. So to be mindful of moving on to something else that will stimulate you. Eating well and a good diet is so important.
It's so important. I was listening to your last guest talking about, exercise and health and food and how they're so interconnected. I heard a wonderful dietitian speak recently. She had, at the start of her presentation, she said, if you eat rubbish, you'll feel rubbish. And I almost stood up and said, I'll go home now, because that really summed up the whole thing. I think particularly at the Leaving Cert, the temptation for students is to build, stores of sugars and carbohydrates. So you eat loads of junk food, loads of energy drinks, loads of chips, loads of all the nice things. You get a huge spike in energy. And then maybe when you sit down in the evening to study, you can't figure out why you're exhausted.
There's a crash.
There's a crash.
And the responsibility of that falls with Mammy and Daddy, or one or the other. Take that off the students' shoulders, because they've enough there. You got to feed them, you got to fuel them. Yeah,
well, certainly I think the week of the exams, it's nice to come out after 5 or 6 hours writing and have your nice treat, whatever the treat is for the kid. But I think in terms of a healthy lifestyle leading up to it, making sure you exercise, making sure that you maintain a good bedtime schedule, making sure that you're not, say, after 4 or 5 in the afternoon, no more caffeine. If you stay up very late at night and drink loads of caffeine and eat loads of junk food and cram, you might be productive that evening, but the next 2 days you feel terrible because your energy level is low, you're not remembering information, you're feeling more pressure. So it's to be measured, to be balanced.
Of course. Taking frequent breaks, I'm jumping ahead here just so we can get through some of the important bits. Taking frequent breaks and staying hydrated, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a different trick when you're doing the state exams. You don't want to have the 2 litre bottle of water, because You know, you're going in and out to
Toilet
the toilet,
runs, yeah.
you know, and if you're doing honours maths and you're sitting 3 hours into a paper, you don't want to go out every 10 minutes because you're hydrated. But certainly coming up to the exams, your energy level, your memory function is affected by hydration. And particularly if you're drinking a lot of caffeine, then you're dehydrated even faster. So it's more difficult to remember material and study, you know. So
prioritising your study and the making a plan. I mean, how does one go about prioritising?
Okay.
Do you start with, okay, what do I need most work at, or do I get the easy stuff out of the way?
Yeah, well, maybe a simple thing for people to think about this time of year is what I call as a fixed list. So if you come out of your mocks and you know 3 poems that came up, I didn't really know them, or there was a maths formula I didn't really know, make a list of all your faults and fixes. And there you have an instant fix list, something to do for the next few weeks. Make sure that you've at least eliminated those. I think another good tip would be to look at exam papers, at least be aware of the compulsories. So if you know, for example, that you must have three, say, sections in climate, or 2 sections in rock, or 5 parts of biology, know the key core sections and at least guarantee yourself that you've got those prepared as well as possible.
Foundation, almost.
Yeah. Not just studying it. I think a mistake people make is, they accumulate loads and loads of knowledge. But the real test in the exam is, can you reproduce it?
Of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we could all, we could take all of the guests that were in studio this morning and we could learn the ingredients for today's recipes. We could also memorise the procedures for making it. But you and I know the first time we let everyone loose in the kitchen, it's not going to work.
You'll have 10 different plates.
You'll have food poisoning, you'll have the studio burnt down, you'll have all sorts of problems. So it's, for me, to succeed in exams, what I help young people with is to get them to realise there's the technique of producing it, but there's also the knowledge, and you need the two.
I think interesting as well is with the mocks is that you're actually getting a test run here in terms of prepping yourself for the mocks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Take that into prepping yourself for the real deal then in June.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a vital thing people really need to have done at this time of year is an exam plan. So when you're going into the exam centre, which questions am I answering, in which order, for which amount of time, and how much marks?
And move on.
And move on. Be very strict on that. Because,
and before we let you go, for any parents watching this morning of students about to take exams, couple of words, advice.
First 2 words, stay calm. I see a lot of parents who are very anxious, understandably very worried about the Leaving Cert, because it's a big, big thing in their kids' lives.
Because you'll pass it on.
Don't transfer your anxiety or stress to your young person. Support them, give them advice. Make sure that you can look after the I suppose, the fixables, so the transport, the sleep, the food, the hug.
The day-to-day stuff.
The day-to-day stuff. You might be dying inside and you might be having a double heart attack, but when they're going into English Paper 1, smile and tell them everything will be fine.
Great reminiscing.
That's really
I just cannot believe it's 10 years since I did my leaving.
10 long years.
Goes like that.
It does, doesn't it? Thanks a million for coming in,
That's
Enda.
lovely, actually.
Lovely to see you.
Thanks, Enda.